Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Bump Podcast, a place for the believers of the unexplained, monsters, and paranormal. Join us, and we'll go face to face with what goes bump in the night.
I'll just start from like the beginning because I think it has a lot of reason to why I even ended up in witchcraft. So, I grew up in like a pretty abusive household. My dad was like really a giant alcoholic, drug user, very abusive, mentally, verbally, just constant, like just it was horrific. And he was really abusive to my mom and my sisters. So growing up, I grew up in the Methodist church, but I did not, I never related with God because I didn't understand how God could allow me as a child and my sisters to have such a horrific upbringing. And I just figured he did not love me or care about me. So I knew of God. I knew I should fear God, but I did not have a relationship with him at all. Like, didn't ever talk to him, didn't, nothing. And I knew I should ask Jesus to be in my heart. And I did when I was young, but it wasn't anything heartfelt. It was just all like, I know I'm supposed to. But then, turned 17 years old. I no longer was forced to go to church, so I didn't. And I was looking to the world for everything I needed. Didn't have love at home, so I, of course, dated and dated and dated. And I looked in validation in my friendships, partying. So that turned to partying, drinking, drugs. I I had done pretty much everything under the sun basically. And I was never like, I never felt happy or content or satisfied at all. And I just figured like this was just life. One day I'll die. I'll go to heaven because I'm a pretty good person. And that's it. Well, I met my husband and he was a Christian, but also he would say he's not religious, and he didn't like church, he didn't like the whole church setup, but he too believed in God, he feared God. So it was like the perfect storm where neither of us were encouraging each other to find anything, but we thought, we had each other, we were good. Yeah. So I remember last year, because that's when I got into witchcraft really heavy, was just last year. Okay. And I remember one day just being like, there's got to be more. Like, there has to be something else out there. And I don't think it's just God, because I had heard about New Age and like there being other gods and goddesses. And I was like, surely Christians aren't the only people that got it right.
Right.
There's too many like religions out there. It just didn't make sense. Like, there's like, how do we know that's real? Well, I worked with somebody who was a Christian, but she also dabbled in witchcraft. And she was like, basically, I do both. So I'm like covered by God. So if I die, I'm going to heaven. But also, I can do all these other things. I can cast these spells, and I can have, I know what's about to happen because of my tarot cards and all of this. Wow. And immediately I was just like, whoa. And then it felt like someone was like, it felt like something was saying, yeah, like, do that. That sounds right.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
Yeah. And I was like, this is amazing. This is exactly what I've been missing. This is what I've been searching for my whole life. The universe has brought me to this moment for this reason.
Yeah.
And I remember when she took me to this witchy store, which I became a immediate regular at. And it was owned by a witch. And I remember talking to her and just feeling like vibrations in the whole building and just feeling this is where I belong.
Yeah.
And the way they speak about it is like, it just made so much sense because they would immediately say things like, pagans, Christianity got everything from pagans, and this is actually the right thing. And they would try to discredit everything in the Bible and how old the earth is, and that doesn't make sense. And then, why is there magic in the world? And it was just, and I wanted it. I wanted that information. Like, I wanted to hear that.
Yeah.
This was all making perfect sense in my brain. And I had already had like a shopping addiction at this point, again trying to fill a God-sized hole with everything but God. So I went crazy. Like, literally, I bought like every single herb, every single oil, multiple tarot decks, tons of crystals. And I told them, like, I want to be taught in this. Like, I want to know how to do this. I bought probably 50 books. It was insane. And I started learning from them. And I really started, I started casting spells, and I started reading tarot for myself and for other people. And I saw that things were actually coming to. And I was like, this is real. Like, this isn't just make believe. Like, literally, I read a tarot spread for somebody, and that happened for them like within the next week.
Yeah.
Which now I know is putting verbal curses on people, because they were like, oh yeah, that's going to happen. They came in agreement with that, and then it happens.
Yeah.
But I thought I was actually a witch. I thought that this was my destiny. I thought I had always been a witch, and that's why I didn't fit in at church. It's why I didn't fit in with Christianity. And I was like, I'm a witch. But then I was like, but there's a tiny voice in my head was like, what about God though? Like, what if you're wrong?
Right.
And I was like, well, then I'll be a Christian witch. Just like my whole life, I'll believe in God just enough, just in case.
Right.
But I wanted to say this, I had never read the Bible.
Right.
I didn't listen to church. I did not know what God's word said about anything, nor did I look into it at all. But I would buy 50 books on witchcraft, and I was reading those all day long. Yeah. And I started doing more and more. So I would put, warding spells on my house, and I would talk to the spirits in my house, and I would invite, my quote unquote ancestors in when I was doing tarot reading. And I was inviting entities, demons that I did not realize were, because I saged, because that'll take care of that. Because I cleansed my crystals, because I cleansed my tarot deck the correct way, because I allowed my tarot deck to pick me and not me. It was the rules of how to properly do witchcraft. It now makes me laugh, because it's like I was so blinded and deceived. But I had not been possessed yet at this point, because I never, asked to see anything. I never astral projected. I never tried to like somehow mesh myself with the spirit. I would always have like tell them my boundaries and be like, I don't want you to come all up in my space, but you're welcome to like help me with my tarot deck. It's just crazy to think like we humans think that we have them figured out, but they definitely have us figured out. So they know the lies they tell you that this is a safe way to do it, when it's really not. There's no safe way to interact with a demon.
Right.
But so I remember just feeling like I needed more. And at this point, my husband was kind of like, all right, you need to kind of like cool it, because I was spending thousands of dollars on this stuff. And I was spending every waking moment I had trying to figure out the perfect spell, trying to practice my tarot, trying to buy graveyard dirt and figuring out the right way and what ways to use that. And I was actually really tempted to start cursing people that had hurt me. because that would fix it, right? My dad, I wanted to do the shadow work. I wanted to put as many walls up on myself as I could. And I also started getting this feeling that I needed to introduce my child to this stuff, but I didn't. But I felt this huge urge to do that, which is like really frightening now, or it was, but did not do that. And my friend who I worked with, she was constantly like, this is amazing. You are definitely a witch. Like, this is all making sense. Like, very supportive of it. And her spirit guide would tell her things to say to me. And the thing that made me get the pendulum, which is when I got possessed, was her spirit guides told me that something really, really bad was about to happen. And I really need to get in touch with like my spirit guides. I really need to protect myself. And everything has happened, right? Everything that someone had said or I had said had happened. And so I was like, oh, what is going to happen? What's about to happen? So this thought of I need to get a pendulum, this raging thought that I could not get out of my head. I was like, I'm going to go get a pendulum. So I drove like an hour and I went and found this pendulum, and I immediately got in my car and downloaded this app that had this like letters on it so it could spell out things. And I was like, I had already had them stage it in this witchy shop because they know me by name, right? And I was like, I need you to cleanse this. We need to cleanse this right now. I need to use it. Something bad's about to happen. And like, they're of course like, yes, absolutely. We need to do this. And I start, you say, I only want to interact with my spirit guides, as if that supposedly only allows your spirit guides to speak to you. And you're supposed to ask it questions that only it would know. And I started asking it questions from my childhood, from elementary school, from when I was born. Oh, wow. This thing knew everything. It knew the name of my teachers. It knew what hospital I was born at. It knew everything. And I was blown away. I was like, this is my spirit guide. No one else would know this about me. So this spirit guide starts telling me like everything's going to be okay. I'm glad you contacted me. Like, I already know that, your friend had told you. This thing had been following me. I have now come to conclusion my whole life.
Yeah. They call those a familial spirit,
yes,
out of the family. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And so it eventually, I trusted this thing so much that when it started to ask me questions like, hey, if you say yes and allow me to enter your mind, I can show you things that you would never otherwise know. I can show you what heaven looks like. I can show you what your future looks like. I can tell me anything. It would show me anything. And the first time it asked me that, I about fell out of my seat with the reaction of absolutely not. Like, no, you cannot. Like this, it felt like there was a wall was placed between me and the pendulum. And I remember sitting back up straight, like, I don't know what the heck that was. That must be a trickster spirit trying to like interrupt whatever I have going on with my spirit guide. And I was like, okay, no, I'm doing this. So I said yes. And I could feel it wrote out, this is going to feel weird, but just hold on. And I was like, okay. And it felt like this wave. It literally felt like I was underwater. Like it physically felt like I was swimming. And it also felt like I was going to pass out. It was the weirdest thing I've ever experienced. And then it all stopped and I felt normal again. But the next thing I know, I'm seeing streets of gold in my mind. Like you would imagine something, like you could see someone's face in your head. That's what I was seeing, but it was way more vivid. It was like almost like a movie in my mind. And like that. like, this is what heaven looks like. This is incredible. And it would show me beaches and the way a beach would look in heaven. And it was like the most beautiful beach you could ever imagine that was like off a cloud. It was like crazy. And I was like, this is real. And I was like, but that means God's real. And that was like a light bulb moment. And then I was like, and I don't know why, but I felt like I needed to ask about Jesus too. Because in witchcraft, I was being taught that he was a prophet or the greatest magician that ever lived. And I accepted that. I accepted that Jesus was actually, a magician and he actually practiced really good magic and it wasn't work of God.
Oh, wow.
And once I started thinking about that kind of stuff, that's when things started getting bad. That is when I started getting really, really angry. Anger I have never experienced, where I was just so mad that I like physically like wanted to hurt people, and I had never done that my entire life.
Right.
I had already been diagnosed with depression and anxiety because of my dad, but this was like on a level 100. Like I would just lay day, could not move. My sister brought over food one time and the thought of she poisoned it ran rampant in my mind and I like could not breathe.
Yeah.
And then I get on my pendulum. I'm like, oh my gosh, am I okay? And he would say, no, you're not. You need to go to the hospital. I think you've been poisoned. And it was just like inciting fear over and over and over. But then on the other hand, I would think about God more. I would keep asking questions about Jesus. And then I kept getting these weird thoughts that I need to get a Bible, which I thought was like really weird. And so I was like, okay, this is really weird. And so I would go on doing this whole time. I'm still doing witchcraft. I'm still doing spells for other people at this point. I'm still reading tarot. I'm still, in contact with other witches, learning under them. And my spirit guide keeps asking me, hey, let me in. I need to show you something. Hey, I've let him in probably 10, 11, 12. Wow. Which I'm at this point 100% certain there was multiple different demons every time because things got worse and worse and worse. So the only thing I remembered from when I was younger at church was the pastor said, if you remember anything, remember that the devil disguises himself as the most beautiful thing. So when you think a beautiful job opportunity comes up, pray about it because it could not be what you think it is. Or this person that you think you're going to marry, pray about it because they could actually be abusive. And that's the one thing that ever stuck. And that's what I started hearing in my head was a thought. And it was a gentle thought. It wasn't like the thoughts that I would have of, that person over there wants to hurt you or you're worthless. It was a very quiet, gentle thought. And I would hear that or I would think about that and I'd be like, and it would just make me think just enough.
Yeah.
I remember asking the pendulum one time, the demon, is God actually real? Is this all real? And I remember it went crazy. The lights in my room started flickering and the pendulum was swinging H-A, 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 like ha, 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 ha.
Oh my goodness.
God is absolutely real. And then I would start seeing figures walking around my room. And I started getting really scared. And then I felt this urge to ask him about Jesus. And I was like, is Jesus real? Flickering stopped. The figures went away. Immediate. And I was like, what is happening? I'm sobbing and I'm waiting for my spirit guide. I'm holding on to the spirit guide for dear life. Like, please, just tell me the truth, right? I hadn't gone to the Bible or anything yet. And they said, Jesus is real. He is the Son of God. He did not die on the cross for you.
What?
Left it at that. could not deny Jesus, but
Right.
did not want me to know what Jesus had done for me.
Yeah. Wow.
So after that, I was like, okay, wait a minute. That's not what they're teaching me. They're teaching me like Jesus was a magician. They're teaching me Jesus didn't die on the cross. But he did. But this is real, but God's real. And like I was starting to connect these dots, and then suicidal thoughts started coming. And these thoughts I've never been suicidal my whole life. And I would never leave my child or my husband in that way. And honestly, I was terrified to die because I didn't know what was going to happen.
Right.
And it was though these thoughts I would see myself hanging. I would see it. I would see myself hanging in like a stairwell. And it was an image I tried to push that image out of my head. I would say absolutely not, like that's not real, but it wouldn't go away. It was like a movie that was on pause in my brain.
Oh, wow.
And then I get on the pendulum. The spirit god's like, oh my gosh, I think you're actually going to do it. I think you actually want to do it. I think you want to. And it was like, really, yes, very encouraging of it. And I was like, and then I started getting scared of myself. So I called my husband. I was like, I'm not safe right now. I'm really scared. I think something bad's about to happen to me. And he's stays on the phone, comes right home, and the thoughts are like they have lessened a ton. And I was like, okay. And I tell him everything. He had no idea I was in contact with a spirit guide, no idea that I was seeing things in my head, seeing figures around our room.
Wow.
I told him everything.
So you had been hiding this from your husband the whole time?
Whole time. About 6 months. Yeah. And he's like, you got to stop. This is not okay. He's like, I don't know, about, spirit guide. He doesn't really know about any of that kind of stuff. He's like, something doesn't sound right here. And that's all he knew. And I was like, okay, yeah, you're right. I gotta do something. And I got back on that pendulum. As soon as he left, I got back on that pendulum. And the pendulum typed out pray. And I stopped, I dropped it, and I was like, pray. And I got back on. I was like, spirit guide, who am I praying to? And it said, pray to God every time before you use your pendulum. And I was like, okay. And then I was like, okay. And I was like, and that was the first time I talked to God. And I don't know if ever.
Yeah.
And I was just like, God, I was told to pray to you. I don't really know what to say. This is what's going on. And I just laid the whole thing out, basically what I just told you.
Yeah.
And I felt lighter. And I remember just trying not to cry, but then crying and then being really confused. And then the thoughts were lessening. And we went back and forth like this, where I would use the pendulum. Pendulum would say, pray to God. I'd pray. I did this for weeks. I'm stubborn and really dumb. And then it started to tell me, Jesus loves you. Jesus died on the cross for you. And talk to God. Pray before you eat. Be thankful for what he's doing for you. I feel like crying right now because it's like,
thank God. Yeah.
It's incredible. And I remember the last day I used my pendulum. I had told, I've been praying, talking to God. And I told him, I can't keep going like this because the thoughts of suicide were getting worse and worse. And the way I kept feeling, at this point, I would see demons around me, which I didn't know, I still didn't know they were demons, but I saw figures of human/animal formed figures walking around my room.
Wow.
Or walking in the living room. They were just around me all the time. And I would have horrific nightmares. like I was being drowned or stabbed or whatever it may be. And I told God, I was like, I can't keep on like this. I don't know what to do. I'm really scared. And and that I was like, you protect yours, right? Like, that's what you do, right? And he laid on my heart my godmother, who's been like a total warrior for him for 40, 50 years, like basically her whole life.
Right.
And that's when she started talking to me how God feels about me, what Jesus did for me, what I'm experiencing. It's not spirit guides, it's not my ancestors or demons or demonic beings. She started laying out what God says about witchcraft in the Bible and why he says these things, and it was like God was speaking to me through her.
Amen.
Like all of my questions. And I remember I got on the pendulum one more time because I was like, I did not want to let go because I found identity in witchcraft, right? Like I was starting to kind of be known for that. People were coming to me for tarot readings and for spells, and I had found how I can put out good in the world. And before I said anything, it said, get every bit of witchcraft out of your house right now. Take all the books, every oil, every spell, every journal, every little spell jar you've made, all your candles. I mean, thousands of dollars worth of stuff out of your house right now. I threw the pendulum on my bed, and it took me a couple hours. I had probably 10 trash bags of stuff.
Oh my goodness.
Out of my house. And I felt instant pressure off me. I felt like I could breathe. And I got back on the pendulum.
Yeah.
It said, never use this pendulum again, destroy it.
Wow.
And I just held it. And I didn't want to. I did not. Everything in me was screaming, do not do that. And then I was like, nope. And I went and I got like this. I don't remember. I think I used my scissors from work and I was cutting out the chains. I was smashing the crystal with a book and out of my house. And I was like, okay, what do I do now? And I felt just so much rage inside and so much turmoil and so much confusion. And the suicidal thoughts were ramping and ramping and ramping. But I had remembered some verses my godmother had told me. And she told me that I have authority now over these things. And he who is in me is greater than he who's in the world. And I was like, okay, wait, I've never asked Jesus into my heart and meant it. So I went to work the next day. I walked into my break room, and I just felt this huge urge that I need to ask Jesus into my life right now. And I was like, Jesus, I don't know you, but I know you died on the cross for me, and I want to be covered by your blood, and I want you to show me how to have a relationship with you and how to walk for you, and I need you to help save me from myself. I need you to help me get these things away from me. I don't know about anything about following you, but I want to. Again, I just felt instant pressure off, a huge calming coming over me. And I felt for the first time in my life, like content and whole. And I didn't feel anger and I didn't feel resentment towards my dad. I had like this weird forgiveness for him already, like implanted in my heart. And I wanted to call him and just tell him that I forgave him.
Amen.
But I was fighting that for like a few weeks. But I started reading the Bible and I started really digging into what God says. And I prayed, and I still do this. I talk to him all day long.